a question, Tang will share his story with us, but when you come to ask a question, if you can turn your video on, just so we can see one another's faces. You don't have to have it on the whole time. That's okay. Although it is nice to see everyone. Please make use of the chat. So if there are questions that come up as Tang is speaking, drop them in there. Tang, you don't need to answer them, but at least we can go back and just see what people are wondering. And we'll have time to go through those. Of course, stay on mute. Many of us are from at home, and I have a dog and a small child. So you don't want to hear that background noise. So I'll remain on mute during the session. And then, as I said, we will be recording, particularly so we can listen again and learn from Tang as well. So a huge welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. A big welcome to some of the regulators who I see are joining us from across the region. I see we have someone here from Uganda, and I'm sure that we have others as well. As shared before, we have regulators who will be shadowing this program so that they're able to launch similar ones we have with us this evening. This is the first of our speaker series for the second Bima Lab Accelerator. This is sponsored by FSD Africa and Prudential. Nope. And so we are very grateful to have you all here this evening. And today we're going to be learning from Tang, who will speak to us about his journey as a successful Insurtech founder. You will soon see that he is a serial entrepreneur who has lots of experience that he will be able to share with us today. And so with that, briefly, our agenda, quite simple. Our kickoff, our welcome is now. We'll spend time learning with Tang and hearing a bit about his journey and his learnings. And then after that, we'll pause. There we go. Hopefully that is better. There we go. For the question and answer, please write down any questions that you have, and we'll be able to take time at the end to answer those. We'll close out, and then for those in the Bima Lab cohort, we'll see you all on Friday. So with that, I'm not going to do justice with this introduction, Tang, so I would like to just in advance ask you to help me fill in the dots. But just to give you a little bit of a gentleman who has a pretty substantial career as a serial entrepreneur who has focused in the financial and insurance industry. And at this point stands concurrently, I think you still stand with all 4 of these roles. So I'm impressed that you're able to take time for a vacation. But we really would love to learn from you so you can tell a bit of your own journey, how you got into this particular industry, the fuel that, lights your fire to start and lead many of the businesses that you have, and particularly what can the entrepreneurs in this program, what can they learn from your journey? That's really what we're excited to hear and see, what are some of those learnings that we can all take as we think about building businesses. So with that, Tang, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Emma, and thank you to all of you for having me here and taking the time to share or to let me share my experience. The first I will start with is a caveat. And the caveat, I will take the word from Peter Thiel. You may have heard of Peter Thiel. He was one of the co-founder and the CEO of PayPal himself. He was also the first external investors into Facebook at the very beginning of Facebook. So he's someone who himself has been tremendously successful and has reinvested after that in investment funds. So all his career has been about startup. And he was doing a series of conference about entrepreneurship in, I don't remember if it's Stanford or another very famous university in the state. And one of the things he was saying is that don't try to do the same as a successful entrepreneur. If you try to do the same thing as Mark Zuckerberg, you will not succeed. If you try to do the same thing as the founders of Google, you will not succeed. Everything is in terms of Insurtech, everything is new only one time, and it's by getting to create something which in a large way never existed, that you can be like one of them, but not copying them in any way. So that's only intended as a disclaimer, because what I will tell you about my own experience may not be what is relevant at some times in your own path. But I suppose, however, that it is a series of experiences which could be giving some guidelines, some benchmark to invent your own recipe. Never take a recipe to just try to repeat it. Starting from myself, well, first allow me to introduce myself as an individual. I'm of French nationality. I grew up in France. I have a French father and a Chinese mother. But after that, I've been living my professional life in many places in the world, in Scotland, in China, then in Paris, then in China again. Then I went to Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon, which are a group of islands in the Atlantic Oceans bordering the Caribbean and Northern America. Back to Paris, back to China again, back to France again now. So that's a pretty diverse geographic experience after the beginning. And the good things about it is that it shows that it's not because you're born in a country that you're bound to evolve only within those boundaries. It may be the place where you feel yourself the more relevant at some point, but you have the right to be global and to take experiences from everywhere before you bring back those experiences wherever you want to apply it. I'm not born an entrepreneur. I was born as someone who was very curious about the world, but with no ideas about what I want to do in the world. So when I was in my early 20s, I didn't even know whether what I want to do is to write books or to enter into a business activity and business life. And I fell into the financial service industry really by pure chances. I was looking for an opportunity to go and to work abroad, and one presented itself, which was for a bank. And that's the only reason why I joined the financial service industry. But once I started there, I stayed in the financial service. Even so, as you will realize, and that's why I'm here, I've also been going from banking to insurance to payment to credit. So a lot of different experiences as it went. And that's something I believe in. I believe that some people can be extremely good because they do one thing and only one thing all their life, and they will become the best person in the world or one of the best to do that. But there is other ways to develop yourself, which is to, like if you build a wall, you need to have several bricks at the first level to be able to add bricks on the top. So if you try to just bring a column of one column of 1,000 bricks, it will fail at some point. So I'm rather the weight basis type of model. Even so, I stayed mostly in the financial industry. I shall say, however, that I still couldn't prevent myself from writing books as well. So I've penned a few books in a few novels as well. Back to who I have been professionally. I started as something many of us do when we don't know exactly what to do by joining a company. So I joined a bank, and by some chances, the bank who recruited me in a specific program, which is sponsored by the French government and which allowed to recruit young professional or young people with high studies and entering the professional career, to send them at the other end of the world sometimes to help the industry develop. So my second professional experience was the first one was to go to Scotland to teach a mix of economy and French in Edinburgh. But the second one very rapidly was to be sent to Shanghai. And I was sent to Shanghai in 1991, which show you that I'm a dinosaur, right? That's already 30 years ago. And I was sent to Shanghai in what was the rep office of a French bank. But it was at the time in 1991 when China started reopening to the world and reopening its economy. So we were one of the first foreign bank, the first batch of foreign bank in China, allowed to reopen a branch in Shanghai after 50 years of communism, during which no foreign financial institutions can be present. And that was my first experience, not as being an entrepreneur myself, but of building and launching a new activity. So that was I was very lucky to do that, because I could experience from the beginning of my career an experience of something which is relatively rare when you work for an insurance company, when you work for a bank. Very often you work into a huge institution and you are requested to do something, and you have a small box which is your job, and you are expected to work within this small square. But when you have to launch an activity from scratches in a very different environment, then you need to do everything at the same time. And this was a little bit more. This was a little bit less the big wild west than it is when you launch a startup for your own. But it was still a lot of this. And when you launch something, there is a huge difference, right? When you launch a startup or when you launch a new business, compared to being in a company and continuing to run a company. To come back to a language used by the St. Peter Thiel I was referring to, this is going from 0 to 1. So 1 is a very small figure. It seems to be less to go from 0 to 1 than to go from 1,000 to 1,100. But going from 1,000 to 1,100 is a 10% growth. That's a nice growth, but it's only a 10% growth. Going from 0 to 1 is multiplied by infinite. So that's something which, by the nature of it, is you're doing for the first time something which has never been done before. And that's a huge challenge, and that's a huge adventure as well. And I don't know about the individual story of each one of you, but I think that if you are there at Bima Lab with an Insurtech project and you have launched it or you're launching it, you certainly have this taste for an adventure. So you are the mix of something which is very very particular, having to mitigate at the same times, trying to build certainty and reduce the risk, and at the same time really jumping into what is the most uncertain things by nature. I think, well, I've started to speak more about my beliefs and my experience, but I'll try to go from the one and the other, from my experience, my course, to some of my experience or what I think about Insurtech or creating a startup, and I hope this way that will make it more lively for you. All right. Let's come back to what I've been doing, and well, even if you give me a lot of time to speak about myself, but I shall still go forward. Otherwise, I will get you there for 1 or 2 days. So I started. I spent 12 years in this bank. It was a corporate and investment bank. I worked in different environments, from China to the Americas. In different type of banking activities as well. But really the first part of it was this specific experience of the first time I tasted creating an activity from scratches. And of course, I was not running this activity at this time. I was not an entrepreneur. I was not even the head of the country head for China, of course. I was very young. But that was nice. So I continued 12 years, several continents, several countries. That was interesting. Finally, I stopped that after 10 or 12 years to stop 1 year to write a book. And then I came back to the financial industry because guess what? Writing books is really, really interesting. But it's really not the best thing you can do if you need to provide for your family, your children, and have a house over their head. So I went back to banking initially, and I was well. I found an opportunity to go in a place which was extremely different this time, which was a very small island, very small archipelago, which happened to be still French. You know, after the decolonizations of France, there were a few places which stayed French, and this one stayed French because basically it was an archipelago where there was only rocks. So the only population which was there were French people, which were the descendants of those people who have been fishing all over the world, very far from France, and that's you have absolutely no indigenous experience like there. But there was a small bank, and I was hired by another banking group who purchased a small bank, and it's the same in insurance. When you have a big insurance which is purchasing a very small insurance locally, or when you have a big bank which is purchasing a very small bank somewhere, after purchasing it, usually after 1 or 2 years, they start to find that things are not run the way they want. So they send people to pretendly put the things back together. Which was another quite interesting experience, even if it was so different from what you do if you're an American in Brazil or America in China, because it was not like in China 1.4 billion people. It was just a few thousand people. But what was interesting is that in an environment like this, you have nearly only one bank. So the first thing which is strange is that we walk through the island, and everyone you know are people whose financial situation you know, because if they have business, you're financing the business. If they don't have a business, they have bank account, and the bank penetration is being high, you know everyone's situation. So it was a little bit strange, but I did that for 1.5 years, going from the islands which were in the northern Atlantic, so very cold. The port, you could sail there, but half of the year the port is frozen, so the boats are out of the sea. So you see more icebergs or whales from time to time. To other islands which were in the Caribbean, so quite nice. But Nonetheless, after 1.5 years there, I was living there with my spouse, and after 1.5 years, she told me, "Oh, that's very nice. I'm very happy to become here. It was very interesting, but can you think about going somewhere else?" So I had the choice between losing my employer or losing my wife. I decided for my wife over my employers, and I left this island, and I had the chance of being hired by another French bank who wanted to launch an activity in China, and that was another experience of launching something from scratches. And there we had specific situations because China has a lot of regulations for foreign banks coming into it, for foreign insurance as well. And among those regulations were such that when I was sent in this place, there were only 2 of us in this, but with the mission to create a banking activity, I realized that if we want to go the full path, we need, of course, to get a license from the regulator. I know that the regulator is here also in this attendance, and I will say only good things about regulator, and very easily about the Kenyan insurance regulatory authority, because anyway I know that they are really dynamic in trying to develop and encourage and facilitate the development of innovations, and we are here, and the fact that we are here together is a proof of that. But in China, the regulators have such rules that if we wanted to be doing what we wanted, which is to do some consumer finance mostly, and bank credit card and consumer finance, we will have had to have a rep office for 2 years before we can pretend to ask for a banking license. This banking license will have allowed us only to work with international corporate in China and not with Chinese company, and only with companies and not with individuals. So much for consumer finance. Continuing forward, after 2 years of doing this, we may obtain the renminbi license, so start to be able to run local currency activities. But it's only 2 years later that maybe at the end of it, we may have the chances of obtaining the right to be able to work with the Chinese populations in their currency to give them credit. So basically, if we started, we couldn't do anything before 8 years. I'm not telling that only to tell you about my life, but to bring into the discussions the topic of agility. And you have a lot of situations when you want to launch a business where you have so much things which are making it complicated to launch some things. And sometimes it's the regulation. But usually, if you're not in a hostile environment, you can really also look for ways to redevelop your business into a different way so that you can achieve your objective and the objective of the clients you want to serve in a way which is coherent with the regulation, but which allow you to find other paths to do it, and not to, when you have a regulation, of course, some regulations can appear to be a wall preventing you from doing something, but in most cases, that depends on your agility and how you want to build a business model. So in China, in our case, the recognition is, okay, we can wait for 8 years before we do the business we are here to do. But the other approach was, all right, we don't register as a bank. And in fact, we registered as a consulting company, but we built partnership with Chinese bank and Chinese financial institutions to be able to organize the business which we wanted to, the business model we wanted to be able to develop, to finance consumers in big retail chain through partnerships with Chinese banks, which were able to bring at the same time their license and their balance sheet, while they were not aware of this type of interactions with hypermarket chain, very big retailers, to be able to bring finance to the users to help them purchase more. So we built partnerships with those banks and with retailers, and we were allowed to bring our expertise of running this type of business model, but leveraging the license of actors who have the license there. So it was perfectly compliant with the regulations, but this was at the same time still allowing to invent new models. And in many fields in insurance, you'll find that it is the same thing. You have needs on one side, needs which can be for the final consumer, final users, who can be needs from the B2B partners and clients that you may have, and you have to be able to look for different way, innovative way to serve them in the environment you are with. So anyway, that was the second experience I had about launching an activity, financial activity from scratches. We did it during 8 years. I did it during 8 years because the activity continued after I departed. We started by developing credit card programs, co-branded credit card programs. After that, we developed prepaid card programs. It was huge. I think we issued something like 40 million of prepaid card per year. That was really a huge volumes. And in the partners who were retail partner were supporting, we were bringing a turnover which was representing 10 to 15% of their overall turnover. So there was really a big benefit for the B2B consumer as well. And the last things we did was launching payment programs. Now, we had also some insurance upsells and cross sells to our client, but the last part was about payment, and that was an interesting experiment because first we rolled a 20,000 payment terminal within this big country that is China. But it also gave us the possibility of partnering with a lot of people, and like Alibaba and like WeChat, WeChat Pay. Alibaba in terms of Alipay, the payment subsidiaries, and WeChat Pay, the payment subsidiary of WeChat Tencent. I just realized, I suppose that most of you have heard about Alibaba, Alipay, and Tencent, WeChat Pay, but you're not taking the conference from China, but from Kenya. So Alipay and WeChat Pay are the Chinese equivalents of M-Pesa, and due to the scale of China, have between I think that Alipay have 1.2 billion users, among which 800 million in China. So that's pretty huge. So anyway, that was the second experiment of startup entrepreneurship. Again, more in kind of banking, credit, payment environment than in insurance. And then that led me to my first real Insurtech experience. So after doing this for this French bank for 8 years, I thought it was time to do something, and I wanted to launch my own startup. And I was looking for in which way to do it. And in fact, initially I was thinking about to stay in the environment of credit, and I was looking into peer-to-peer applied to credit. But in China, the peer-to-peer sectors applied to credit had been developing extremely fast over the last few years. So when I wanted and when I was able to launch a startup of my own, there was already 2,000 platforms of peer-to-peer credit. So I thought, all right, this is not a startup anymore. This is not innovative anymore if there's already 2,000 platforms there. So I need to do something else. And I've been trying to find the ways to apply the peer-to-peer idea of bringing people together from the credit sphere to the insurance sectors. And that was in 2014, still something, a very new idea. You have today, we are 7 years later, you have a number of peer-to-peer insurance models which have been experimented successfully or not around the world, but 6-7 years ago that was still a very new idea, even if one or two actors at other places in the world were starting to do it. So that's what I did with a company which was called Tongtripo. Tongtripo meaning in Chinese the equivalent of together between friends, protect yourself. So mutual protections, collaborative protections ideas. And the way I did it, it can be done in other way, but the way I did it was in a relatively radical interpretation of it, which was disintermediating insurance. So what is the ideas of it? The idea of it is you bring a lot of people together, they share a risk between them. If something happened to one of them, the other will be contributing to help him repay his damage. That's a very old idea. That's a very old idea. First, I think that in many places in Africa or even in other continents, you have different form of tontine, with different form of model where people at a village level may share the risk of, for example, having to pay for the funerals when someone is dying. It's a form of peer-to-peer insurance. So it exists for very long. And in Europe, I think it's around the 15th century, you already have in maritime city, in Genoa, in Italy, in Amsterdam, you already had group of merchants. The problem of merchants is they could be very rich, but if they had one or two boats, they were sending a boat at the other end of the world. They were buying a lot of goods on it because that's what they were supposed to sell on the other side. And if the boat was sinking on the way, they were bankrupt. So they started between the 30 biggest merchants in one specific city to enter into an agreement. But if someone loses his boat, all the others will be chipping in to help the merchants to buy back a boat and to buy back the goods to be able to continue its activity. So the model of peer-to-peer insurance is the root of insurance. It's something which exists for very long. But until now, it didn't have the internet universe that we have. It didn't have the capacity to mutualize very large number of people who don't know each other. And it was also quite impractical in terms of payment, to organize a payment between the parties if the number grow a lot. So that's what is the new element and the interesting element in peer-to-peer insurance nowadays. So I launched a model, very innovative in China at this stage. I had another actors which launched purely Chinese who launched a model at the same time, and we started developing that. I think I had a great idea, and I had too many great ideas because I wanted to, and that could be an interesting learning as well. At the same time, I wanted to launch a new model, and then I told myself, all right, I don't want to be competing directly and face-to-face to the Chinese big insurance companies who are doing car insurance of this kind of. Logically, you go to car insurance, it's the biggest market, the biggest volumes, etc. But I thought I prefer to go into a wild territory, a virgin territory, and not compete directly with those huge behemoths who have obviously much more money than I do to develop it. And I launched a few quite unusual products to cover against a different form of social or societal risk. I'll mention three of them. The first one was an insurance to protect in the context of a divorce, because when people divorce, they very often have financial difficulties because well, you have much more expenses on both sides. If you're lucky, you don't have to pay your lawyers to fight against each other. But if you're not, that's an expenses. And then you need to, well, if the poor people live separately, maybe both need to have a room for the children, etc., etc. So the reality is that in many countries in the world, the second reason for over-indebtedness, the first one is losing your job, and the second one is getting into divorce. So there was a logic into it, but that was a very new concept as an insurance. A second one I decided to develop was quite unique as well. It's in China. There has been cases of child kidnapping, and this is quite a frequent event. And it's not kidnapping child of very rich people to ask for a ransom. It's kidnapping children to be after sold for illegal work or illegal adoption or worse. So that's something every parent is very frightened of course. So we were thinking, okay, how do you fight against this? And the answer is, of course, you don't fight by giving money to the parent who has his child being kidnapped. That makes no sense. If you're decent parents, you really love your child, and it's not no amount of money will replace him. But what we understood is when a child is kidnapped, the only solution to find him back is to be able to find him immediately. So to find him immediately, you need to pay investigators to be able to find back his track within 1 week. Otherwise, you have never no chance. I won't continue on this. It may be an interesting story, but we don't have so much time. But what I wanted to attract your attention with is that in my case, with this project, which was a great idea, I tried to be innovative in every direction at the same time. And I think that was probably one of the mistakes which resulted in me developing a startup. We developed 50,000 users, so it's not ridiculous. It proves that the concept was having a sense, but we didn't scale a tremendous amount as we could have in China. And probably it's because we're too innovative. So you have this kind of quite challenge as an entrepreneur, as a startup entrepreneur, to define you want to be innovative, you want to differentiate, but at the same time, it's important not to make choices which are so innovative that you're too much in advance for your own client from your own market, and not to lose everyone because you're going too fast, too far. All right. So TongSuper, I ran it. We did it. I sold it to a Chinese financial company after 2.5 years at 50,000 users. It was probably too early, but also it was a model to continue to scale it. I needed to have either the support of someone having a very big network already, who having much more fun than I had to be able to scale it up. So I decided to sell it. That's kind of the end of the TongSuper story, or one of the end of the story for this TongSuper activity. But it's pretty interesting to look at the development after that of the mutual aid industry in China, because this model was taken over by dozens of other actors in China, and 2 of them have been reaching incredible scales. And those 2 were, not surprisingly, one was an affiliate of Ant Financial, so the company which is a holding of Alipay, because they built the same model, but they built it kind of inside their payment wallet. And by building it inside their payment wallet, they were able much more easily to scale it to their own existing users. And the existing users of their payment wallet were between 600 to 800 millions in China only. And by doing this, they were able to, in 2 years, barely more than 2 years, 2.5 years, reach 105 million users. So that's an incredible proof of the scaling capacity of this model. And that's a model which was so successful in China for 2 reasons. The first one is, remember, I developed very complicated coverage for new contexts. They did not. They took a basic medical coverage for critical illness. Because in China you have a part of the population which is covered by medical insurance if you're working for a big state-owned company or if you're working for international companies. But most of the rest of the population, 70–80% of the population, have a very poor medical coverage. So you had a very big need for this medical security, medical protections for the main critical illness. And that's a story that certainly you could think about in Kenya or in other African countries, I suppose. So they succeeded thanks to two elements and reached incredible scale because, one, there was a need for critical illness, which was largely underserved in their own market, plus they were able to plug it on a digital payment wallet. I think that when I'm saying those two things, for everyone living in Kenya, that should trigger some light on, well, but in Kenya, do we have a large uncovered population for medical protections? And in Kenya, do we have a payment wallet, digital payment wallet, mobile payment wallet in your case, which is available to the majority of the population? If you answer yes to those two questions, then probably it means that there is you could be tempted to do something in this field in Kenya and many other countries in Africa. So that was to finish the story about peer-to-peer insurance. If I'm coming back to what I'm doing today to finish my own story and to open the floor after that to you for questions, I came back to France. I had been living 10 years at the other end of the world. I launched a startup and I came back without having any of the, well, it's not like you work at the other end of the world for big groups and the big group bring you back to your home country. I did the startup in another country. I sold it. I sold it, which was nice, but I sold it for an amount which was not very high because I sold it probably too early. And I had to because it was consuming a lot of cash. And I came back to launch something. So I came back to France and like a very normal guy, I came back to a country and I said, oh, now I need to earn a living here. And I had to fund it. And I've left this country for 10 years, so I have no network here. And how can I find it back? So that's just another aspect of the entrepreneurial experience. And that's a tough one. But sometimes when you stop an activity and you need to go back to different things, what can you do? You can, as I think you can go back to a company as an employee but that's very difficult. That's very difficult for you because you once you've been tasting to the experience of being an entrepreneur, you won't be surprised to hear that it's very difficult to renounce to the everyday toughness, but everyday liberty as well that you have doing this. And it's sometimes deemed difficult for traditional company to bring someone in who's coming back from a very different experience because they're afraid he will not adapt very well. So for this reason and for by taste, I ended up starting another startup. So the first other startup that I started was this time not a fintech, not an Insurtech. It was this time a consulting activity, and a consulting activity, strategic and operational consulting for the financial industry, for bank, for insurance, for fintech, for Insurtech. And this is P2P Protect Europe. P2P Protect was the name of the company I used also to launch a peer-to-peer programs in Asia. It was the holding company based in Hong Kong. But I used the same brand initially to develop my activity in France, and I approached insurance companies telling them, all right, there is this model, it's doing such great thing, will you be interested? We can help you launch it. And then it developed into an overall consulting activity. So from the peer-to-peer Protect Europe activities, It's a boutique investment. It's a boutique consulting firm, and I've been advising a bank wanting to launch a neobank model, full digital neobank model. I've been advising a startup who had launched in a neobank model, but who wanted to add a bit traditional credit activities into it, or innovative credit approach into it. It led me also to have you saw on the slide Chief Operating Officer of High Europa. So High Europa is just launched, and it's an affiliate of Maïf, developing an international activity for Maïf, which is a French mutual insurance company. So they were a mutual insurance, but very domestic, and they wanted to launch an activity internationally. So at the beginning, I approached them as a strategic advisor. So for 1.5 years, I advised their directors of international strategy to try to build a strategy of internationalizations. And then for the past 8 months, they asked me to build them on a startup as a service model, a new activity. So when I'm saying Chief Operating Officer of High Europa, in fact, I was given a mission to build a startup called High Europa, except that High Europa is a brand of Maïf, of this insurance company, and not an independent startup. So that's a new type of intervention, which is a startup and consulting at the same time. What else am I doing here? I'll mention the fact that I'm the general manager of a newly created company in France, which is called Nuapay. It's a payment service company. It's a payment service company dedicated to digital payment only, and especially developing currently open banking payment. That's a side benefit from Brexit. This was an Anglo-Irish group which used to be serving all of Europe from London, but they needed a financial license to operate, a payment service provider license. And due to Brexit, their UK London license are not valid in the rest of in the European Union anymore. So they had to create a company in Europe, and they chose French, and they hired me to help them to create and to launch this company, which I started doing for 8 months now. And the last case is a seed company. You see the mention of Algorithm, co-founder of Algorithms. This is a seed company which is using artificial intelligence to be able to assess more precisely through algorithms the value of distressed asset portfolio, which when banks need to sell those portfolio to fund who want to buy it. So I think I've been quite going around most of my financial activities. What shall I say to conclude? Emma was of the opinion at the beginning of the conference that I'm really doing too many things in parallel, and she doesn't understand how I can have the time to talk here. I have the time to talk here just because I'm incredibly interested into everything happening. Well, because when you started being involved in startup entrepreneurship, there is a bit of a drug element into it. It's very difficult to stop. So as you are all starting it, I wish that it will be for you as intoxicating as it is for me. And in the best case, your first entrepreneur, your first Insurtech will be such a success that you'll be all your life taking care of it. But the other alternative is also that this one, at some point, you need either to sell it or it doesn't succeed. And however, it may very well happen that this is an experience you can never forget about. And you may have high and low into doing it, but I do hope for you that you will always want to continue doing this. I think it was 45 minutes or 50 minutes, Emma. So as an introduction of what I've been doing, I hope it's enough. But feel free to ask any questions, you or the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I have to just say, it's quite a journey that you've been on. And I think, you know, the statement of, I do think that it is addictive, right? Starting something new, building it from the ground up, problem solving, getting creative, working on, like, iterating on the fly. There is something about it that if you have spent your whole life in, you know, sort of traditional work, you might not understand, but hopefully those on the call, you know, both who are starting their first business, but who may be starting their second or third, clearly are addicted to what it means to build and be a creator. And so, you know, I really appreciate hearing your journey and your insights. I think as we go into this opportunity for those on the call to ask questions, you know, please take advantage of all of the wisdom that Tang has shared, what we can learn, and particularly how this can help you think about your specific work as an entrepreneur or with the company that you're focused on at the moment. There are two ways we can do this. You can either put your question in the chat, but I think it's better when you ask it. So if possible, you can either turn on your video and unmute and ask your question, or you can use the raise your hand. But I'll open it up first to those on the call who might have a question that they would like to ask. Jihan.
Hello. Hi, Tang. Thank you so much for taking us through that. I think it was super interesting to listen to your journey. I have sort of a two-part question. I just want to understand a little bit more about, you know, how you went about assessing and seeing how they were the opportunities for certain products. So what is it that you were looking for when deciding, you know, what kind of products they take to market? And then secondly, I guess for B2B2C sort of models where customers have to actually go and buy products, how, and I think in some cases it's more reliant on the partners that you're working with. So what is it that maybe you did to make sure that, you know, products are successful that are launched through partnerships where you don't have direct control over that?
Well, if only I knew how to do that. I've been, as you've heard, I've been sharing cases of something I thought was a very nice intellectual ideas of product I've been launching, and we also made some market survey which were trying to prove that there was a need for this. So the first thing I will recommend is that if ever you do market survey, you can make. Maybe you want to make two types of market survey. You want to make one type of market survey to be able to convince people that this is a great idea and a great product. But when you're making a survey, you always have a way of turning things in such a way that it will give the answer you expect for. So, because just telling a story in a certain number of ways, you need to introduce, when you launch something new, you make a survey, you need to introduce what it is, right, to the survey person before he can answer. And if you introduce it with your own belief of all the good that's bring, that's good for a pitch because you want to attract investors, but this is not good for you to confirm to yourself the validity of your ideas and the validity of what you want to launch. So I have currently, I run everywhere one or two masterclass about entrepreneurship, and what I'm trying to push people to is to a fail faster approach. So a fail faster, I'm sure that many of you have heard about this methodology, is just taking your purpose as being able to identify as fast as possible what could be wrong into your project, into your ideas, into your product. So bring it to be tested, and don't bring it to be tested in such a way you'll obtain the confirmation you want. Bring it to be tested in such a way that your attention will be attracted to any possible weakness of misunderstanding or misinterpretations of the consumer needs that you may have. And because the earlier you get this answer, this negative answer, the earlier you can try to pivot, adjust your product, and make it better. So don't assume that you have the right product because you have the right ideas only, but really find everything you can think of to see if you can break it between bracket, and to break it before you've built it. Because if you spend 1 year and this amount of money to be able to build it, and when you launch it to the market at the end, you discover at that times everything which is not right, it may be too late for you to change. Hopefully, it still be time for it, but you'll have wasted money, you'll have wasted time from every of the co-founder that you will have been wiser to keep it for later, for the next difficulties on your road. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jihan. Are there others who have a question you'd like to ask? You can raise your hand and I'll call on you, or as of course, you can put your questions in the chat.
I was thinking a bit about some cases of product fit, which started very fast. So if I take another case, well, the two cases I have in mind right now of Insurtech startup which developed quite successfully. There is one American, one Chinese. The American I thought about is Lemonade. So Lemonade was created in 2015. It had I think they have raised something like 800 million US dollar already to develop their activity. And they were quite successful. Well, first quite successful in raising money, but still they have issued 1.2 billion insurance policy already, which after 5 years is not that bad. They have started initially in New York. They rolled out to 23 other states. They rolled now to Europe and are live in Netherlands, in Germany, and in France as well. So they were quite successful. And what they launched is certainly not something. Well, in terms of product, the product is a renter's insurance, renters or homeowner insurance. So housing insurance is certainly not something which is innovative as such. And what allowed them to accelerate very fast is that they position at the same time on a very affordable price level, but also all the positioning of the product was focused on instantaneity, on it being digital, on being instant, on being perfect for the new generations of mobile users, etc. And their two biggest tag is to say, we are instant everything. It takes you 90 seconds to get insured, and it will take you 3 minutes to get paid only when you have a claim. So that was a strong case. This 90 seconds, 3 minutes. So that was a pretty strong cases, and quite playing well with the frustration of people toward the traditional insurance, which is the impression you have a lot of paper to fill, a lot of times to get approved, that claims are maybe very complicated to obtain. They played everything on simplicity. So this is a case where the product as such was extremely ordinary, except that it is rather on the cheap side of the price range of an insurance product. But it was really the communications and the instantaneity associated to it which make it a difference. So that's one case. I'm trying to continue to respond to your questions about how to find the right product. So it's not a recipe to find the right product, but this is one case of an insurance company which succeeded in launching a new insurance company. You don't have in Europe or in America a new insurance company launching every other month, or for long it was not even every other decade, and until those Insurtech started to change the game. The other case I was thinking of is Zhonghang Insurance. So it's another very, very big insurance company. It's one of the biggest insurance company in the world. And they had, in terms of volumes, they reached even much higher volumes. They were founded in 2013, so they were created 2 years before Lemonade. And they claim to have 460 million users and to have issued 5.8 billion insurance policies already. So that's of course extremely surprising. But the two elements which are notable in what they did is that, well, they were digital only also. They launched a lot of very small insurance products. And very small insurance products, it may mean something like a flight cancellation insurance, for example. And they did it in a very gamified way, which is allowing people to purchase the flight cancellations even very late in the process. So, of course, a lot of volume were coming from it is sold when you purchase a ticket. That's the traditional ways of launching, selling travel insurance. But they allowed people to purchase it online, even on the day they were taking their taxi to go to the airplane. And they even allowed people to buy it from the airport, unless a certain number of a certain given times before the plane was supposed to take off. So it means that if you are a customer and you were in the airport and you see an announcement, oh, your plane will be 20 minutes late, the indemnity is launched only when the plane is 2 hours late or more. But it was still possible with 20 minutes late for people in the airport to buy from their telephone this type of insurance company. So there was a kind of gamified approach to it. So I was kind of keeping the floor while other questions were coming, but I think that new questions came in the meantime.
Yeah, and Tang, thanks for those two examples. I particularly like how they highlight the simplicity of a solution, but really understanding that customer pain point and how do you actually solve for that. I see Jolly has, you have your hand raised.
Hello, I had written my question on chat. I was asking about how you've done any research on the peer-to-peer insurance and whether it would work in Africa and how it's working in other countries that you studied. Thank you.
So, so of course there is research on peer-to-peer insurance. In fact, that's a subject that I'm staying very close to, because well, I'm trying to evangelize a bit about it when I can, and I've been advising a certain number of insurance company or Insurtech in France or in Europe, in France or in Italy, on the concept. Your questions was, is there some research and will it work in Africa? So the first thing is that it already exists in Africa, at least in South Africa, because you have a company called Pineapple Insurance, which is developing a peer-to-peer models in South Africa. They have developed it not in the health sector. They have developed it more on a casualty and on insurance of small electronic products. So about insurance of having your computer, your laptop being broken, your phone being broken, this kind of electronic products being damaged. So they did it for, I think, three years already. In fact, I'm saying that they are doing it in South Africa, but they are developing both in South Africa and in the USA at the same time. So that's the case. You can find them some information on them online, and that's interesting. Nonetheless, in my eyes, the biggest potential in Africa for peer-to-peer insurance will rather be for the critical illness challenge, as I was saying before, because there is a huge need. The medical protections penetration in most African countries is very low. And because if you find the right way to distribute it in the right countries, that's something which can be usually successful, and in particular bringing a huge benefit to the population.
Okay, thank you very much.
I had the occasions also to mention it from time to time to some of my friends in ERA. So I started to make the case for it in case if ever you want to do it. Feel free if you want to contact me later. That's a field that I'm happy to support, a field of experiment that I'm happy to support in general.
All right, thank you. I will do that. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. I saw a couple of questions in the chat, but I'd love to actually have us ask them if possible. Ivan, are you able to unmute and ask your question? I guess we will have to come back to Ivan. Fidelis, if you're on the call, are you able to unmute and ask your question? I particularly like this one.
Okay, thank you. My question, I think, is straightforward. I wanted to ask Tang, if you were given this same chance to say read through the process again, what would you change? What would you do different? In other words, what things would you improve through this journey? Thank you.
So, thank you for your question, Fidelis. So maybe different type of different element of answer to that. But the first thing I'm thinking is that when I launched Donchipo, my first own startup, my approach was, to be able to make it successful, I need to be ready to invest some money in it out of my own pockets to be able to launch it. And this was an approach of first, it can be needed for a certain number of things, and if you are responsible for your project, you should be able to put risk, to take risk into doing it, and risk your own finance into doing it. So that was my approach, and I found it particularly coherent, and that was a part of courage. You believe in your idea, you put your own money, and after that you go to ask more money from other people. I put my own money, I probably burned my own money, then I went to ask money from other people, and I found it sometimes to develop it. Nonetheless, this is I'm not sure whether this is really the best idea or not, depending on the nature of your activity. Some activity are by nature generate excess cash. Some other activity generate for a long period of times negative cash flow before you can break even and balance. If you are in an activity which is generating cash rapidly, I will say that this is a quite a legitimate approach. Say, all right, I'll put my money, I will seed my own activity like this. Every contract I'll be selling will bring me money, and this will allow to self-finance my development. I will say that for the consulting activity I've been developing for the past few years, this is working perfectly. If you don't have a client, you don't have revenues, but as soon as you have a client, you have revenues, and you can self-finance your own development. On a certain number of Insurtech activity, you may be in a different cycle where the need to invest initially, especially in B2C activity. In B2C activity, even more than on B2B activity, you have the need for initial investments to be able to create the volumes before you can expect to break even and come up. And either you are extremely rich to start with. It was not my case, and maybe it's the case of some of you, but probably not every one of you. So if you are not extremely wealthy at the beginning, you need to be in a different approach, I think, and to see, to be in a standpoint where you have, all right, if a part of this testing of my idea to define whether it's viable or not, which I was mentioning before, a part of it is to see if the idea is sellable to people who are ready to support it by putting their money to help you develop. So I'm a little bit more reserved now. If I've been launching another startup with a different co-founder under the name of Valgorem, which requests a bit more of initial investment, and that's what I told them. I'm willing to do that, but I have the conviction that for this project, for this type of project, if we want to launch it, I like not to start from the assumptions we'll fund it by emptying our own pocket to the group of co-investors we are, but by putting our times, putting our energy and our experience into it, but counting on third parties to be able to fund it when it will be mature enough to convince third parties. So that's one of the things that apparently I decided to do differently, but that's also all depend on what is your situation. If you have family, children to support every day, you may need to be a bit more prudent in terms of maintaining the financial stability of your family.
Okay, thank you.
The other things which I answered a bit earlier on this, Fidelis, on that was be innovative, but don't try to be innovative on every front at the same time in order not to be so innovative that that the market and the clients will not be ready for you yet. Any other question?
Yeah, anyone who wants to raise a hand and ask a question. We also have a question in the chat, but I'd love to open if there's anyone who wants to ask. All right, I will quickly ask Ivan's
maybe
question.
I can ask
Ivan.
because, hi Emma.
Oh yeah.
Hi,
Elias.
this is Elias.
Oh, hi, Elias.
Great, and it's always a pleasure to have you join us, and it's great, and it's good that you're basically having this time with our cohort. I think maybe just to bring this into perspective, this year we are having around 6 regulators joining, and you've mentioned China and restrictions on regulations. And maybe I just wanted to get some thoughts, maybe that you can share with the number of regulators that have joined this call, in terms of how then would they, if they are approached with, say, these insurtechs and innovators, how would they be expected to respond to such innovations and insurtechs? And secondly, maybe to the insurtechs. China has a number of insurtechs, though we talk about very difficult regulations. What do Chinese insurtechs have that still travail such regulations, and quite exciting products still manage to come through? So on both ends, how do we do this? Maybe you can advise on that.
Oh, so I can't necessarily advise on how to be to build the best regulation, because as you know, Elias, I'm not a regulator, so I can only look at it from the Insurtech or the fintech perspective. For me, I see different type of regulators reacting differently to innovations. First, I see on one side regulators which are quite strict and which interpret their mandate of being protecting before all the consumer, but being quite restrictive in terms of innovations toward the Insurtech, the new ideas or the new model from the Insurtech which are proposing it. And this is the case in some countries. The inconvenience that I see associated to it is that it can support the status quo, so it can protect the existing traditional, it protect the users, which is very good, no doubt about it, but it also protects the established model, so it protects the historical traditional insurance company, because if you play with strict rules which are not changing and this kind of not facilitate the innovation, then they will always be at an advantage, and they are not the one to have who benefit the most from innovations, to the extent that the innovations may challenge them. So that's one type of ecosystem, and that's the one which I think is the less favorable to Insurtech. You have approach in many Asian countries, but in like in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in London as well, and in Japan as well today, of having a sandbox, and that's the approach that has been adopted also by the ERA in Kenya. So I find this personally quite a beneficial ecosystem for innovations, because it's allowed to provide some protection on both sides. It provides some protections on the regulator to be sure that he understands how the model plays and how the users are protected before allowing it at scale. But at the same time, it allows also the Insurtech to start experimenting, and to start experimenting in an environment where they know they will not be, they know they are welcome to experiment within this sandbox by the regulator. So it's trying to provide a certain degrees of safety for the Insurtechs by allowing them to go into a different models in something which is not guaranteed to be a long-term approval, but which at least is guaranteed to be something that the regulator is willing to allow to be experimented, and the Insurtech will not be taken by surprise by an unexpected reaction from the regulator. I see that in China there is a model which I thought was quite healthy at the beginning in a different way, but which is playing in a little bit difficult ways lately. And traditionally, the Chinese regulator was saying, okay, I regulate this, and if you are doing this in other sectors, it may be not matching with the regulation, but it's kind of a gray area. It's neither said it's approved, nor explicitly said it's disapproved. And I will just like let entrepreneur, innovator do whatever they want until as long as it is small. I don't care. If it becomes very big, then there may be a need to re-regulate it after a while. And the initial cycle I saw about this were in their way quite healthy as well, because you had significant part of financial activities which were developed in this gray approach, and at some point the regulator was considering to regulations, was sharing the regulation from the actors of this unregulated market, collecting feedback, and before issuing a final regulation. And in some case I saw it going for 3 years, 3 different drafts, one after the other, collecting feedback before they implemented a new regulation. That was the case for the prepaid card, for example. So that was quite virtuous. It was giving a lot of freedom to experiment to entrepreneur at the beginning, even if in a slightly not Wild West, but Wild East type of approach. But then re-regulating things, and my view was by re-regulating progressively with a consultation of the industry, it was allowing at some point to be able to ensure that the industry was staying on healthy behavior, and by usually rewarding the actors which were naturally the most responsible, because the regulation was built around things which was corresponding to the practice, the best practice that the regulators saw happening in the market. So that was pretty good. But in the last few years, I would say since 2017, we saw approach by the Chinese regulator which were more strong-handed into the second phase. And for example, the peer-to-peer credit industry, not speaking about the peer-to-peer insurance yet, the peer-to-peer credit industry was very successful in providing to small companies and individual credits that the traditional banking system was not providing. But it has been uncontrolled for many years, very successful, but also a lot of abuse developed as well. And the result was that the regulator had a crackdown on it. It certainly was right to have re-regulations and to penalize a certain number of behavior which were excessive and illegitimate. But the approach for the regulator has been to kind of destroy all the industry altogether. It put the lids on this industry, and over 3 years, it just break down all the industry. It allowed a few rare cases of people to apply for insurance credit license industry. So a few cases were expecting, but I think it was more a matter of well, maybe 10% finding a way out, and 90% being really cracked down upon. So if you go to this level of if you allow liberty first, but go to a crackdown with this intensity behind, you build something by which you kind of punish innovation at some point. So there is really something, well, the model of the sandbox may allow to avoid it because the scrutiny is much faster on the model. So I would probably think that the sandbox model is safer on both sides and is a good approach. I think that's the one you have adopted and probably recommend to the other regulator in the region. So my own experience, in all humility, as just one of the entrepreneur who may play in this sector, is that I generally feel more confident with this approach today.
Thanks, and maybe I just want to pull you back again. I remember we had a conversation in Paris when I was there. We had a one-on-one, and my question was, you've done all this in China, done it in Europe. Why have you never been visited Africa? What keeps you out of Africa?
To tell you, the first thing is that I've been tempted many times to do it. So I've been tempted, well, as you know, since we first met in Ghana, in this conference in Ghana, and you were kind enough with Ira to invite me to speak to the insurance industry in Kenya as well. And I think, frankly, that the equation is pretty good, and it's a good place to launch it. I would say that if I've not done it yet, is that on one side I was quite concentrated on other things in Europe that times, but the other is that I'm also looking for the right opportunity to do it and to be able to, well, and the right opportunity probably means also the right partners to be able to do that. And I could do that of course, maybe one day I will have an opportunity to do it myself, but I could very well see also me bringing and supporting this development by other actors in the African environments, because I think that's part of what you need. And from our discussion, had the impression that you saw some value in it as well. So that's really something which will be done. I have only 2 hands. I try to multiply them to have 4, and but to do that, well, there is another element, Elias, is that a bit of modesty is also deserved in trying to launch some things in a different country, on a different continent. And I know that I have, of course, so much to learn in the African continent still. So when I will find the right partners, so if there is a partner that you see that I can help building this in the African environments, in East Africa, I'll be happy to bring either experience or more active involvement into building it together.
Thanks, great, and I hope everyone have heard that. Back to you, Emma. Thank you, Mr. Tang.
And if I don't have the chance of doing it myself, if any of your cohort of or startup want to explore it, don't hesitate neither to pair it with me, because that's a field which I think is of will be of social benefit for the Earth and for Africa. So whatever I can contribute, I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tang and Elias. We have all heard it here. So I highly encourage any of our companies who want to reach out, share what they're doing with Tang. You know, learn about interest, the ways that he might be able to support. I would love to just see if there's anyone who has a question who'd like to raise their hand to what's been shared. I'll pause for a moment just to see if there's anyone. And while everyone is formulating those questions, I've been put in the chat a good statement of, they say no man knows it all, which I think true. But one of the questions he asked was, how did you acquire
Yes.
skills that you might not have started with, that you sort of built and acquired skills?
Well, there are two answers to that. The first one is try to learn fast and running. But the other answer, which is even better than this one, is when you're launching an activity, yes, you don't know everything. So it means that it really makes sense to bring together with you in a project some co-founder which can complement your capacity with their own knowledge. So that's about co-founders. And when you continue, remember that beyond co-founders, of course, you're recruiting people. So it's a widely mentioned saying to say that you should recruit people who are more capable than yourself. So they may not be more capable in the field you are best into, but there are some knowledge, some skills you don't have. And please go select people to work with you who have those skills at a much higher level than you have, and then you'll remedy to this problem. You're not a one person. Don't be a one person startup. Try to be a real teams building around a same passion, the same conviction.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think often we heard in our last program, staffing and figuring out who should be on your team is really important. And we frequently underinvest in good talent at the start because we think we can't afford it, or we don't really seek those high quality leaders, and we end up, that ends up being very painful in the long run. So I think that figuring out who your ideal team is at the start is very important to filling those gaps in areas that you need specific support. With that, I'm going to again sort of pause and open. Are there any questions while we have Tang on the line that we'd like to ask? I'll give us, just one more moment. Tang, you can also think of last words that you'd like to share while we see if there's anyone who has a final question.
Oh, last word of wisdom.
I know, tricky one.
Tricky one, yes. So maybe on my side, I would like to say that it's probably a good place, Africa, Kenya, where you are, to do what you are doing. Because when you are in Europe, you can do new things, but you're in a market which is already very mature. So you don't have so much space to take. I feel that in Africa, there is a huge opportunity to do it. So huge opportunity to take, and huge need from the populations around you. So I think it's at the same time the chances of being really of changing life around you. And that's something which will motivate you both in terms of adventure you can be living and the difference you can make in the society. So just be proud of yourself and don't give up. Fight until your last bit to be able to complete your adventure.
Thank you. I think that's great advice, and I think really being able to hone in on the opportunity that exists both here in Kenya but across the continent right? If in Kenya we only have 3% of individuals insured, that is a huge opportunity. It doesn't mean it won't come with challenges, but I really think, that's a nice reminder. And, insurance is about protection. It's about providing an additional security net for those who don't have it. And I think that's part of the impact of the different companies that we have with us in this cohort, the different kinds of security nets that they're providing, that really will make a truly meaningful impact on citizens' lives in Kenya and beyond. So Tang, thank you so much for that. Elliot,
pleasure.
any last words?
No, not on my side, but thanks a lot, Emma, and all of you for giving me this chance to convey and share with the team there. And I hope that you'll be very successful in this Bima Labs second accelerator programs, and that I will hear about your project a lot in the future.
Absolutely, Tang. Thank you so much. Tang is also a mentor for this program, so we'll be working with one of the companies, and we're deeply grateful for you taking the time to be here with us, to share your wisdom, and also to remind us of the impact of this work and why we do this. So thank you again so much. And with that, I'm going to close out our first speaker session. I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening and feels inspired and excited for the next 12 weeks of learning together. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
and everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.